Here at the Maryland State Archives, today is January 25th. My name is Corey Lewis, Assistant State Archivist. We have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Haddad Nunez. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Can you share what inspired you to pursue both law and communication in your academic and professional career?
Thank you for that question. I think that was actually one of my favorite because it touches on something that it goes very deep into who I am, like not just my profession, but in part of also my identity. I am born and raised in Puerto Rico. I am Puerto Rican, but even in the island, I was a little bit of an outsider. My last name is Lebanese, so people were even in the island constantly asking like, how did that happen? How Haddad ended up in Puerto Rico? And I mean, being a little girl, you kind of have to learn how to answer that question very early. So for me, I kind of realized very early that I was kind of like, at that moment in the 80s, a daughter of globalization in a way. My mom got pregnant when my grandma was studying medicine in Mexico, in Puebla. She was young. She was saying goodbye to her boyfriend, 16 years old, and she figured out when she was already in the island. As a joke, I say I have made in Mexico somewhere. But in that kind of like journey, growing up and having to learn all these things and having to also learn how, depending on where you are, your cultural background, all those things has such an impact in the way that you communicate. And I had to learn that very early. And I fell in love with that, with the concept of globalization in itself. And in that process, I thought, and I got my law degree, I went to law school, because I fell in love with human rights. And in that process of human rights, it was really mainly the concept of how this beautiful piece of law, which is for me the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, being one piece of law can be applied the same way all around the globe. Like, why is it that it's so difficult for different countries to grasp these concepts? So in that journey of learning of that, I realized that, wait a minute, law, it's so ingrained. Like, the concept of communication is not just the process of sending a message from point A to B. There's so many other elements that have an impact in that process. So in that journey from going to law school and falling in love with human rights, that's kind of like why I ended up here, because then I moved out of Puerto Rico for my master's in comparative law in Florida. At that moment, I was still in love with just law, and I was dreaming of becoming a human rights attorney at some point. I still dream of at some point being at the UN organization, so that will be like my long-term goal. But at that moment, I started working with the person I consider my mentor. He's an exile from South Africa, and he fought for apartheid when he was young, and he has dual citizenship stuff. So in the process of working with him and having a few academic publications, he was the one that recommended you should keep going, and he recommended Howard University. So he helped me with my application for the PhD in communication, and it kind of all felt like it was falling in place, like it was making sense. So from that moment, my life kind of shifted, and I started in academia mainly and teaching. I started using law and communication as a way to educate my students in all the aspects of all the courses that I teach. And now I'm adding the element of psychology too. I know you didn't add that too, but I'm working on a separate PhD, a separate degree on international psychology to then have a better grasp of how all these elements have an impact in how people live their lives, to see how we can figure a model that can improve everybody's life. I'm very optimistic. I believe in world peace someday.
Thank you. How has your Puerto Rican heritage shaped your perspective on teaching, leadership, and advocacy in Maryland?
I am unapologetically Puerto Rican, Latina, Hispanic, Caribbean, because we kind of bring all these two elements in the mix. And at the same time, learning about the things that I talked about in my first answer and about how I ended up in this profession, in my career, I also had to learn or unlearn a little bit of who I was because of the processes of colonization that the island in itself has gone through throughout history. The island belonged to Spain for 500 years, and Spaniards are high context, cultural context, the way that they communicate. And then we have been part of United States for a little over 100, which it's less, but the impact in a way has been greater because of all the advancement, technological advancements, and so just learning how, as a Puerto Rican, these dynamics have impact who I am, and how not so much colonization, because by force it ended up in the 1950s, but neo-colonization, which is really through the mind, how learning how the Puerto Rican identity in itself has been influenced by so many outside forces because of neo-colonial dynamics. I like to use that same model to teach my students, regardless of where they are or who they are or where they come from, how the same dynamics can also have an impact within who they are or who they think they are. So I sometimes force them to question themselves whether who they are, it's because of what they actually like or because of others have told them they need to like, which is a lot of what the Puerto Rican identity is about.
So what drew you to Williamsport High School and Washington County Public Schools, and how do you envision making an impact?
Well, that was a very intentional journey. I've been a college professor educator for a little over 10 years, and I get a lot of undergrads, young students, students from all ages, but the ones that usually get the most my attention are the younger generations. Because with time, I notice more and more how gaps of knowledge are increasing, and basic information that, because I have a law degree again, and I think that there are basic legal information that we should all know, at least when we turn 18, because overnight we become responsible of every decision that we make. And I started realizing that this not young adults, no longer kids, they didn't have this knowledge. So I started becoming very curious. And of course, one school is not going to give me the context of what is going on all around the nation, but at least it gives me a taste. And if I consider myself an academic, a researcher, a scholar. I like to write. I like to, as an activist, I also like to voice whatever I see that it's not working, and it's not working based on my opinion. I also like to go to the legitimate foundation that says how things should to be working, and then I compare them to how they are actually working to make these arguments. So that's kind of what I wanted to taste high school, to see, well, if I'm going to talk about something not working, I rather do it from a place of experience, even if it's a little bit, but at least I can start exploring what is it that it's missing in this bridge between high school and college that we are not paying attention to, because this is what it's strengthening the pipeline, right? The different pipelines that we have.
You see as the most pressing challenges facing Maryland's Hispanic community today, and how do you hope and plan to address those issues or challenges?
I think there are many issues affecting the Hispanic community in general, but I think the one that I recently think it's impacting the community the most, it's the lack of inclusion. I think and specifically, I think now the conversation becomes even more relevant that we are hearing the DEI concept being attacked in every front. I understand the attacks, and then as a Hispanic, Caribbean, Latina woman, I also have my own kind of opinions about what has been going on with it, because although I appreciate the intention of it, I think we also need to be realistic that in recent times, the focus of this diversity, equity, and inclusion concepts hasn't really been including everybody in community. So when you focus on only including just a few, then you're not really doing what you're saying you're trying to do. And that gives the other side the perfect arguments to attack these concepts and convince those who are still in the limbo about what they actually mean to then be more inclined to say, yeah, they don't work, they're not really doing anything. And I see that happening a lot with the Hispanic community when we are constantly used as tokens. We are just being put in places to say, yes, we have a Hispanic women or we have a smart Hispanic, accomplished, whatever, but then we are not allowing this person to use his voice to be part of the decision-making process. And then what for, right? So I think, yes, we can talk about education. Like right now, I'm heavily pushing on the fact that Maryland, it's the only state in the nation that the GED, the part about the learning, the reading and learning art parts cannot be taken in Spanish, cannot be taken in other language other than English. And even states like Texas, Florida, they allowed for this part of the GED to be taken in Spanish or in other languages. So Maryland being the only state in the nation, I think it says a lot specifically when we are under administration that wants to leave no one behind. So we really need to make the effort to not leave anyone behind. So we can talk about education in that sense. Small businesses, we're not getting the contracts, right? Like yes, we get all these programs that say small business, support small businesses or women, Hispanic women. But when it comes to the moment to actually use those skills, those certificates, those licenses, we are not getting the contracts. And those contracts, where are they coming from? The government. So what are we talking about? We are not really getting included in I mean, I can keep going in all the areas that we just give the perception to be included, but we're not.
Thank you. I really appreciate your perspective on that.
Sorry, I get very passionate.
As you should, yes. Thank you. As a member of the Washington County Trial Court Judicial Nomination Commission, what criteria do you prioritize when evaluating judicial candidates? And how do you ensure diverse voices are represented in the process?
So as a former member of the Washington County Judicial Nomination Commission, that was a very interesting adventure, I would say, very gratifying. I'm very glad that I was able to be part of such a great opportunity in a moment that nobody expected. And again, under such sad circumstances, because it was a judge that sadly got killed that made it for that to be put so quickly. But it was a really interesting moment because Washington County in general, historically, from what I know, I've been living in that area for 4 years. I love it. I love Hagerstown. But the more, it's very historical. So even with the 4 years that I've been there, I'm constantly learning about so much. There's so much that has been happening there. And one of the things that I was told very early, it was that diversity wasn't a thing in the past in that area. So it's growing now. It seems that it's increasing very quickly. And from what I feel, the area is very open to this. Like I haven't felt any type of social or community rejection to this increasement. They might be not enough resources, but again, it's because it's happening so fast that things are now, there is a need now for that type of organization. So I was very glad that I was able to be part of that process, specifically because of that, because there hasn't been that much of a diversity within those processes in the past in that area. So having a Puerto Rican, Latina, Hispanic, Caribbean women with a law degree and a PhD, smart proving that it can be there, it was very interesting, very rewarding. Having a voice and be able to give a voice to those in the community who want to see people that look like them in positions like that. So even though at the end the decision was probably not the one that I would have probably celebrated, I'm not happy, just the one that I would have been like, woohoo! At least I was able to be part of the process and give a voice and make sure that everyone in that room knew that we can do the work.
Friendly Law serves an important role in supporting law students from low-income backgrounds. What motivated you to fund the nonprofit, and how do you measure its success?
Again, it has so many layers, that question, because I'm very intentional on everything that I do, and I think most of what I do and the decisions I make professionally had a lot to do with who I am also personally. I went to law school. First of all, I became a single mom at 19. And before that, I was always that girl growing in the island, and everyone thought that I was so smart until I got pregnant. And then everyone used to say, oh, she was so smart. And that really Yeah, I was the type of young person that you couldn't dare me to do anything. So for me, that was like a dare. I was like, I need to prove these people wrong. So that kid, he turned 22 on the 24, actually yesterday. He just turned 22. So 22 years ago, I became a single mom, and he became my motivation to just keep going and make sure not only that I could prove those people wrong, but I could prove myself that I could do anything that I could put my mind on. So I went to law school at that moment thinking that that was going to be my only goal, and it really didn't was. But it was really because at the time that I finished, and I come from nothing. I have no networking in the, like, now I do, of course, with life and professions, you make your networking. But growing up, I didn't came from any important family in the island, nothing. So when I finished law school, I had to face the cruel reality that I had no money to take the bar. Like, I was a single mom, and I had to make decisions about, oh, that makes me emotional, about whether to pay rent or money for my kid or take the bar. And for me, what I decided was to apply for my master's in law. And I got accepted in Florida. So I graduated. I didn't even go to my prom thingy party that they do in law school. They call it like something like that down there. Puerto Ricans they don't need any reason to party. They will party for everything. So that whole thingy party, I skip it. I graduated. I got in a plane because I was able to actually sell my car. And with the money that I got to selling my car, I took a leap of faith. I took my kid, the man that at that moment was my boyfriend for like 6 years. Now my husband, we have been together for like 20 years. And we were like, let's see what happens. So I took that money and I left. And it worked out because I have a good network. My family, my mom, it's my biggest support, my dad, my husband, at that time, my kid. But I started thinking about those who were in my same shoes without the network, the supporting network that I had. Those who didn't have the mom that I had. And my mom had me very young. So when I got pregnant at 19, even older than her, I thought she's going to think this, she's going to just kill me. And completely the opposite. She was just, I will help you as long as you make smart decisions and you always remember your goals. But at the same time, she asked me, she begged me to still be young, to still enjoy life. So for me, it was really thinking about all the things that even though I had nothing, I felt like I was rich. Like I had it all to really get to where I needed to go. All I needed to do was, like my mom said, make smart decisions. So in that process, when I finished my master's and then I got to my PhD, and again, I started meeting undergrads, kids, people, just students that will come to me saying how much they wanted for their life to be different. I felt the need because I'm still very in love with the legal world, but I realized, and when you do the research, there's not that many people in that profession that also look like us, right? It's like a 14% that are non-white in the entire legal profession. So if we want more for us to be done, if we want more people to fight for our rights, then we need to make sure that there's spaces in that field that we can occupy. And it's not going to happen if we keep having people like me that have to make decisions about whether to take the bar or doing something else. So, really.
In your first year teaching at Williamsport High School, what has been the most rewarding or surprising aspect of working with students in Washington County?
Those kids are amazing. They are full of life. Some of them hasn't really come out of that Hagerstown bubble, so they are kind of just thirsty for whatever is out there in the world. One of the things that I remember the most was kind of like trying to tell them or helping them to realize how great Hagerstown really was. Like I was like, take it from a person that has lived in many places, that it's not from him, that this is, so just even that, because they do have the drive to want to make the place better. But I think in a way, again, there are not that many resources that would allow for them to really want to stay or to want to dream big. And that was something that also was a little bit heartbreaking for me, because I think sometimes adults settle for whatever it's around or available. And the area, yes, it's a rural area and this and this and that, but why not motivate kids to dream beyond? And nothing wrong with vocational type of jobs, but if we want all the kids to do that type of job, then who's going to be a doctor, who's going to be a lawyer, who's going to be, so we need to also create a balance. And I realize that in the area, kids feel that after high school, that's it, like there's no need for that much. I'm not saying all, but in a very general sense. And then you don't have that many adults that, like, the adults also have that mindset, like, oh, we're leaving a rural area, this whole white collar, blue collar, which I had to learn. Again, we don't talk about like that in Puerto Rico, but this whole idea. So then you just settle, oh, this is the area that we leave, so then let's just tell the kids to graduate and get whatever certificate. That's all they need so they can make money. Yeah, but they also need to learn how to think, right? They also need to learn about other. So I don't know. I think that was kind of like the thing that stood with me the most, that how much they want what it's not there for them to serve those needs.
You taught at various institutions, from Howard University to Hagerstown Community College. How does your approach to teaching change across these different settings?
Well, and even online, I teach in some universities across the state, and some and also in UMGC, which is part of the University of Maryland. Each campus has a very kind of specific type of student population. I mean, there's students that are pretty general, that you kind of have them everywhere, but there are, depending on the institution, there's going to be a type of community that are going to be gravitate more towards one or the other. Like, for example, UMGC, you have a high military concentration. Like, students come from different military branches. Sometimes they're not even in United States. I teach in Grand Canyon University, which again, it's not in Maryland, but it's online, and that it's a kind of Christian-based university. So you have to also kind of have a little bit of an element of faith, that they kind of expect that you can make sense of what they're learning in that kind of faith context, even if you're not fully Christian or what, so or the other. So also Maryville, which is in Missouri. So and then the community colleges, Frederick Community College is very different than Hagerstown Community College, even though they're like less than 30 minutes apart. So it speaks, you need to take the time to learn how the student population itself is, not just so much in relation of the county, if it's like the political inclination, the income, or no, there's so much, because he also speaks, like I was saying, in terms of the high school kids. What are the goals? What are the dreams that the kids are bringing in the classroom? Why are they even sitting in front of you? And that is also gonna have an impact how much they're gonna even pay attention to what you're telling. Like, if they're there just for a grade, or they're there because so. It changes depending on the campus, and I think that's what it makes just higher education so interesting, that not every student, of course, not every student is the same to the next, but as a group, every group is also very different, and it's your responsibility as an educator to make sure that you mold your teachings to a way that is effective for them.
With your extensive background in communication and law, how do you balance your many roles, and what drives your passion for public service?
Really, people, I think everything that, again, since early on, and I started shaping my professional journey, I did it very intentionally in a way that would prepare me to be the most effective public servant, or the most effective person in any role that I would be that had to be related to community. Like, I don't take those labels or concepts for granted. Community is just not a group of people, right? It's you need to know what community means, how to approach community, the different generational differences, not just the generational in terms of age, but then every age group will have differences depending on their cultural background. So I think for me, and based on what I teach and what I do, communication It doesn't have to be a perfect thing because it's not a thing, it's a process. So I think there are 4 things that kind of guided everything I do, which I try to think of it in terms of how I try to help people. Perception creates expectations. So, and that goes with everything. And communication needs to be appropriate in order to be effective. So it doesn't really need to look beautiful. And I think we are living in a moment that explicitly shows that. Most of us might not agree with the messages that are going on right now in the media. But the fact that we don't agree doesn't mean that they're not effective for the purpose that they're being shaped for, that they're not appropriate for the audiences they're actually being shaped for. If you don't like it, guess what? You're not the audience for it. So instead of being mad about it, shift the approach. Understand why is it that you're not liking it, because someone else likes it. Someone else is understanding perfectly what it's being said. And someone else is going to take action on it, because communication is persuasion in itself. It's always a call to action. So for me, it's really that. If I'm going to be influencing young minds as an educator, if I'm going to be going into the streets to talk to people, for people to take any action, make any decision, I need to be sure that I'm first informed as much as I can. So my message to them, first of all, the perception I'm giving to them is the right one. So then I'm not lying. And then the message that I'm giving, it's appropriate and effective. I want to make sure that when I'm in community, I am delivering what community actually needs. And not just in community to tell them what they need. Because it's not about my priorities. And in this sense, it's not about any administration's priority. It's about communities' priorities.
Looking ahead, what initiatives or projects are you most excited to pursue?
Whew. So many. I am a person that constantly gets bored. I don't know why. I think I'm a little ball of energy that needs to be constantly just doing something. I like to feel effective. I like to feel that I am doing, that I am creating, that I am influencing, changing. Like I said at the beginning, I'm an eternal optimist. I believe the world can be changed and that someday we can have world peace, even if it sounds so like a cliche nowadays. But I mean, if we all at least, I don't believe in the whole idea of holding hands and singing Kumbaya. We're all different. It's about respecting those differences. So I am excited about that. Creating safe spaces for people to be brave in any way they want to be. So taking my nonprofit to the next step, even creating new ones. I am now concentrating in Washington County, and I know there is a need for community organization there. So I want to be intentional in how I go about to now know people in that area, help them getting organized, maybe getting into spaces in which I can be of help for those decision-making processes to be made. I'm still an educator. I'm still behind Friendly Law. I'm still doing so many projects, working on a second PhD, and hopefully being able of putting my part of leaving this world better than I encountered when I got here. So I'm really just excited about the infinite opportunities and the potential of everything that I'm going to be doing in the future.
How do you hope your work with Friendly Law will inspire future leaders, particularly young Hispanic male leaders?
I think one of the things that I created through Friendly Law was law books for children. It sounds like an ambitious idea, but I'm telling you, we can change the world. Lack of education, really, it's what takes away everything from a person's agency or ability to create anything within their own life or just society in general. We live in a society that lack of ignorance doesn't exempt us of responsibility, yet we don't do anything to reduce that ignorance. We profit from it. And as passionate and I am to the legal world and law in general and structure and regulations, I also believe that people need the skills to be able to work with them. And if we don't give them, we are creating a disconnection. We're creating a disservice. So my hope, it's really for young minds to engage in this type of legal literacy early on, for parents to motivate when they're thinking about buying books for their children, to be intentional about the type of books they're buying. Not just a book about, I don't know, a mouse and a dog going into a family and losing a those are things, our family values are important, but they're tools that we need in order to survive in the world that they're going to engage once they stop being kids. And we cannot wait until that moment comes to overnight, oh, you turn 18, for them to already know it all. So I really want, so the main goal of Friendly Law is to create a more diverse legal profession. Because again, if we have a more diverse legal profession, then we have a more broad perspective of what rights should be and how they should look for every group of a member of society. But I think that for that to also happen, we need to start early on. So those short-term goals that would take us to that long-term goal, I think it's really that, for that motivation to begin early, either from parents or kids, to engage with even the Bill of Rights early on. And that was the first one I did. It was a tiny, it's called The Rights of Bills, and then the bill is a little girl, so I switch it all. And then she has this little dog that is called Ira, E-R-A. So in the kind of engaging with a conversation with the son, that is Dr. Son, and he's been around forever. So Dr. Son, it's telling about how this came to be. So I think these things sometimes, yes, as an adult, you think about law and you're like, oh, that's so tedious and complicated and boring and I don't want to engage with it. But it can actually be fun and interesting and entertaining if we just take the time to understand what's happening. And if we start early on, then it just becomes nature when you're an adult. And these pipelines can be broken down because then kids will be less vulnerable to fall in this bad decisions that sometimes take their entire future away without no intention whatsoever. So that's really what I want, for kids to stop getting caught up in the system for no reason, for things that could have been avoided if they would have learned things early on. And the legal field to be more diverse someday. And the bars to be more cheap so more people can actually take them. ABA, if you're listening.
What advice would you give to young people, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds who aspire to careers in law, education, or public service?
First, to really, really learn about who they are. Because the legal world, if it's really not connected, if you don't know how to connect it to really who you are, and then you connect it to what you can get, it can be very corrupted, right? So if you see the legal field as just a means to make money, then rights go out the door. But if you understand who you are, where you come from, what type of oppression has gone through in your historical past, your cultural background, it becomes, I think, harder for those to use law in a way that will continue that cycle of oppression. So really learning, again, self-awareness, self-reflection about who they are, where they come from, what drives their own decision-making process, but also to develop thick skin. Because it is in itself a very competitive, dark, challenging world, especially law school in itself, and then once you try to get in the field. So to try to find that one thing that makes them to be passionate, to wake up in the morning, to really want to fight about and hold on to that really, really tight. Because if not, anything can really shake them and get them out of their track. And then how we build a diverse field. And it's already hard, right? But we can change it from the outside. So just stay strong. Hang in there. It gets better.
So we're at our last question. You touched on this, but I'm going to ask again. If you could leave one lasting legacy for the communities you serve, what would it be?
Oof. Honestly, I think the one thing I would dream to be remembered for more than maybe helping people to love themselves or know more about themselves or be strong or this or that would be to be part of what's happening with Puerto Rico. Ooh, it makes me emotional. um, sorry. It's what it's been moving me since forever. I've always dreamed to just be able to make a difference in what's happening because it's really taking our identity, our land, our history. We are, I don't know if you know about Bad Bunny and what's going on in the media right now, but we have this artist that just got out this big project, musical project, a mini short film, and he's kind of creating awareness of this, and he's comparing what is happening to Puerto Rico with what is happening in Hawaii. And many people understand his message. Others, of course, you need a hater. Everyone needs haters. So there's also, of course, people that kind of have jumped in just criticizing his work. But I think the main thing that he's doing is really just creating a conversation, creating a narrative. That the neo-colonization that I was talking at some point has taken so much away from us that as a community, we love our culture, and when it comes to the Puerto Rican culture, we can be one. But when it comes to the future of the island, we are all over the place. And I don't blame us as a community because, first of all, the system in itself has failed us in keeping us informed about how we even ended up where we are. For example, many people think that in order to fix the situation, you need to go directly to the Congress, when there's actually a document in the United Nations that it's what makes the Congress comfortable in not doing anything. So something that, for example, I teach my students using that is that when you making the right argument, it's powerful. But when you don't make the right argument, it's just noise. And then noise, it's easy to ignore, right? Because even if it sounds pretty, it's not legally attached to anything. So for those in power, it is easy for them to, again, just ignore it. So we have come as a point, as a community, to make it easy for those in power to make anything for the situation in the island to change, to ignore us. And we haven't been able to find a way to come together. So if anything, just for Puerto Ricans to be more open to have that conversation and for something to change, because the status in which we are is just not sustainable anymore. If we want statehood and that's what it needs to happen, then that's what I just want something to happen. If it's going to be independence and Puerto Rico is going to be their own sovereign nation, then let it be. But if we're going to be state, then do it. Because the way that we are now, it's taking so much from us, but it's not giving us any of us back. And then we always become the scapegoat. Like it happened on the Trump rally at the Madison Square Garden when we were called an island of garbage. And so that, for people to remember just to create that conversation, for people outside of Puerto Rico to talk more about it, so something someday happens, and for the people in the island to get together, and whatever it is that it needs to happen, just fight. We are about to disappear.
So that was my last question for today. I so appreciate you coming in. I was already impressed on paper, and now meeting you in person. Really, this has been amazing.
Thank you.